Batu, Barada, Nikto. You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing fine. I've had my breast replaced with rockets, and the surgery has gone well. I do a lot for these shows. I sacrifice a lot.
You do. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes that people don't know about. There really is. Yes, we are talking today about another post-apocalyptic film. We're well into the 90s now. We're talking about 1995's Tank Girl. I think I'm not going to go through the whole plot, mainly because there isn't a great deal. But a girl is among the few survivors of a dystopian Earth. Riding a war tank, she fights against the tyranny of a mega corporation, Water and Power, that dominates the remaining potable water supply on the planet. That is generally it. She's basically sort of yes, this is based on a comic. There are sort of human kangaroo hybrids. There is a tank that responds to a whistle, and lots of weird animation and comic cutscenes. Let's go into it then. So, Julian, what are your initial thoughts then on 1995's Tank Girl?
Well, I remember seeing this in theaters, and I was a big fan of the comic. I loved the comic, and I'm to this day I'm a big fan of the creators. Hewlett and Martin. Jamie Hewlett, you see his fingerprints on so much stuff, and he's been incredibly influential. So I was like tuned in, I was ready for this. And I remember like there comes a point early or relatively early in the movie where I must have thought in theaters like, yeah, nothing here is working, and I definitely still feel the same way. I'm amazed at how consistent my reactions are to movies, no matter, even if I think, well, I was young, maybe I'll like it now, or, well, I was drunk when I watched that. Maybe, sober, I'll enjoy it. My views are always the same. I'm amazed by, there's a gem of a movie in here that I would really like, but, it's amazing how almost scene by scene, it doesn't work. In my opinion, I take it you feel different.
Yeah, it's less. I liked the film because the plot is immeasurably stupid, and that part doesn't really work. But I just enjoyed the ride. I mean, this film's very limited in sort of like what it's able to deliver, but I just kind of like there's almost like an attitude to this film. Like I haven't read the comic in years. I downloaded it and I checked out a little bit of it in the last week. So we didn't read much, but I was like, got the gist. And I got the gist. I was like, okay, I remember the film is trying to funnel a lot of the comic, but is having to sort of distill it down to specific elements. And that's what we're getting. Which is fine. But to me, it was like, I see what it doesn't work as a whole. But to me, scene to scene, there are lots of scenes where I'm like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. This is kind of like madcap. It's kind of stupid, but I'm really enjoying. Like Laurie Petty is great, and I'm on for the ride. So it was just fun, and like it didn't leave an impression or anything over it didn't leave a message or anything. But I think Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn owes Laurie Petty like a royalty check at least.
Yeah, I see that, and I want to like the performance. I want to like these characters. I certainly like that. Sort of like, and my background is I love punk music. I loved punk comics, you know,
Mhm.
you know, even though I'm a state academic, my heart is secretly, a punk kid.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I I don't think I laughed or really enjoyed any of the quips. I think, a lot of them just feel like, well, that's okay. I'm kind of like some of them are really lame. Um, a lot of times it's like, okay, that's a reference to pop culture at the time, like
Yes.
I guess, it's sort of like Family Guy, where it's like, yes, I'm aware these things existed. Thank you for reminding me with your quips,
There was a lot of that where there was things referenced. Even I was like, I think I need to check what that is. Like that's obviously a bit of a dated reference. Um, but that happens. That's fine. There's enough for me. There was enough of like the jokes are the jokes is probably like jokes is probably a bit of a bigging up what it is. You said there were quips. It was more of the energy that just made me smile. Um, it had I don't know. There was like the feel that I had from it, especially sort of like there's certain scenes in it that's kind of I don't know. I don't want to say this is what I hate. There's a forced wacky. When someone says that I'm the wacky one, and this kind of rides that line a little bit, where it's like, oh, some of this is working incredibly well, and it feels like off the cuff, and it feels wacky and weird, and it's not forcing itself. And then the next scene, especially when the kangaroo guys sort of get introduced, from like, oh, this now feels like you are telling me how wacky you are. Like, oh, we're really going to go out, and then obviously you've got Malcolm McDowell, and if ever you want to hit a nail on the head with a sledgehammer, you hire Malcolm McDowell um, to be your villain because he is the worst part of this film for me by a stretch. It does weird things with him that I want to get to later on. But yeah, anything in the first sort of like anything basically anything with Tank Girl and Jet Girl where they were just being themselves and doing stuff, and even when it was interspersed with like animation and sort of like comic cutscenes and stuff, I was enjoying all of that. When I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. It's kind of fun. It feels very 90s, but you know,
Yeah, I mean, I did find myself thinking like, oh, so this is what Soren did prior to being in the Nexus. Is this whole movie occurring in the Nexus? I was very confused by that. Um, yeah, I mean, although I would say Star Trek Generations is a far better written and directed movie than this. Um, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, look, I love one of my favorite movies of all time is Natural Born Killers, and
Mm,
I love the interjection of anime, of comics panels. I mean, I think that's a great idea, but I think like you talk about how bad the kangaroo guys are, and that's true, and how much the narrative just kind of starts falling apart at that point. That's true. But I'd also point out, like, this movie has one of the roughest beginnings of any movie I can imagine.
yeah.
Like, and I would say, like, I'm already totally out by like 15 minutes in. I'm like, nothing makes any sense even on its own terms. And there are a number of just like of bonehead beginner errors that are just
Mm,
objective errors in direction or editing that occur early on. Um, so like we understand that she's with a group, sort of in the outback, although, most people don't have Australian accents. Um, that's
the
okay.
only true the only sort of major Australian in this is Naomi Watts.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's hilarious to sort of see like people deciding whether or not to attempt it or not. And obviously, Laurie Petty decides, for better, decides not to. But yeah, like Ice T and others just going like, no, we're not bothering. Like, we acknowledge this is supposed to be Australia, but like, we're not going to
I,
bother.
I could live with that. But like, so Tank Girl, Rebecca is on watch duty. And I think some of the design work is great, but it's all stuff that's trying to imitate the comics. Which is fine. But so she's on guard duty when, the water and power people, raid and, attack. So I think the movie isn't aware that she's gotten everyone killed. Like, she is a horrible, and she's a horrible person who's gotten everyone killed. And I'm not sure the movie is aware of that. But then she says, bollocks in the most, mispronounced, way possible. And then everyone gets killed, and she sort of grabs a machine gun and guns some people down in a unbelievably poorly shot sort of way that makes, Commando look like a virtuoso directing piece. Even when you cut to that building, it's so infuriating because you get one of the early shots of where it interjects comics panels, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then you cut to inside their dwelling, which you've seen from the outside in the comics panels establishing the shot. And I think, oh, okay, that's a lost opportunity. They clearly didn't have the budget to actually make this, so they just have an interior, model, and they're using the comics panels to establish the shot.
Yeah.
But then you see the building later.
Yeah.
So it's like, why did you not use that's like such a boneheaded, just amateur directing mistake.
This is one of the things where I had to, and I agree, and this is what I said. My biggest caveat for this film is the plot. The narrative is dreadful. The narrative thread in this film is dreadful. I mean, it's no wonder the director, Talalay, Rachel Talalay. The only other thing she did was before this was Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, the worst of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, which is dreadful. And then she's done TV, she became a TV director. And it shows. I think there's a level of my big, I think I've said it before, my big pet peeve at the moment is geography of a shot or geography of a scene is what I'm saying. Where are people? You've said, where are people? How does this thing work? That kind of thing. It kind of sort of bothers me now. It's my current pet peeve for things. But that opening scene, one of the things narratively that kind of irked me about this, and I was happy to go from thing to thing, vignette to vignette, right? When it's sort of oh, this is what this vignette's about. Them building a tank, them escaping, them doing a fashion shoot to steal a bunch of cargo. Fine. Each of those little pieces I'm going to go along with. But this narrative of basically her arc is to protect this little girl, to save this girl at the end of it all, kind of sort of she has no remorse for the fact everyone dies at this place, feels no responsibility for it, because she then sort of is taken prisoner. And so it's it doesn't feel like an origin story, but it doesn't feel like an arc. Tank Girl is in Rebecca does not have an arc in this film. She's a twittering.
Me. No, but she doesn't really in the comics.
But then don't introduce the potential for an arc in the film.
Well, the rescuing of the little girl thing, at the end, after she's rescued her, they're accosted by guys with guns, and she just turns to the girl and says, "Well, it was nice knowing you. We're gonna die now." It doesn't matter. She clearly doesn't care about her own death, but also the death of the girl. It's sort of did you do this on a lark? I think that's what we're supposed to think. But
that's
the
thing.
Strange.
No, that bit, none of that works. None of that works. If you're gonna, because this is where, if you're gonna give this a plot, if you're gonna give this an arc, I thought, do you want a comparison I made to this? Was a film I watched recently, or a series of films I did recently for 20th Century Geek, was Beverly Hills Cop.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sort of one of the things that we debated on that was that it's a comedy film, and that you're there to see Eddie Murphy do Eddie Murphy things, right? So he's a fish out of water in Beverly Hills. That's the kind of the joke.
Mhm.
But the first film starts with one of his close friends being killed. So then he's got to go and investigate the murder. Like he literally goes to investigate the murder. Same with the third one. Like his close friend, his captain or his lieutenant gets killed and he goes to investigate the murder. And there's always like one scene where they're sort of not quite the falling to the knees and going like, no, but the equivalency of what instigates the investigation. But the moment he gets to Beverly Hills, it's like the jokes will start and the chuckles will start, and you're like, hang on, do you feel any grief or like? And then at the end, they'll reinsert the grief or the anger about the thing because he's got to take revenge on the
Right.
killer. Fine, but I kind of felt like that with this. It triggered that same feeling in my head where I'm like, oh, you've instigated a moment with all these people being killed, which she's then going to sort of like, she's going to stand up and she's going to fight. And then you're going to have a series of events where that is not referenced in the slightest, really, until the end when it needs to be important again. And so it very much felt like those, especially those sort of traits of the Beverly Hills Cop series. I was like, oh, you've done it to bookend the film so you can have action set pieces,
Mhm.
but it's not really about that's really not what the film's about. Like, so I'm kind of sort of trying to disengage myself from that and kind of just enjoy it for what it is.
It's tonally inconsistent.
Oh yeah,
right.
massively.
I mean, it's sort of like, the character changes based on the needs of the script.
Yes, or the scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So, other things that really, so, I mean, that establishing shot, I mean, to me, that is like a crime against humanity. It is so offensive. Like, I can't, and I don't know why. It's just like, you have a set. Show us the damn establishing shot in live action. It's a 2-second shot. Why would you not do this? Why would you not establish that before you show us an interior? That is so maddening. We're also made to believe that this is, water is in scarce abundance, and this is it's a hard knock life. And then you have water being wasted like crazy, by Malcolm McDowell. It's just being poured everywhere,
I
like
love that. No, that was something that I kind of
you
loved. Where
like
I'm like,
that?
that was no, it kind of showed. I mean, that's the point. This is a kind of over the top mustache twirling villain, and that's what he's there to do. Like he is going gangbusters, but he's not fun. You know, when you sometimes watch a film and you'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, he's scene stealing. Like he's not stealing the scene. He's just being an over the top villain, but he
Hamming it up.
knows. Yeah, yeah, but like not in a great way. Like he's
Yeah.
hammy, but not the best way. But the problem I have is like, there's scenes that are quite funny. Like this whole thing of him wasting water, I kind of think is funny because he feels he's in control. Like he's power mad. Like the bit where he has a water pistol and he's just sort of squirting people and that. I was like, that's kind of funny, but it's ridiculous and silly, but it's kind of funny. Like, but you said about the tone. One of the things is um we've watched these other sort of apocalyptic films, and obviously this Australian, so Mad Max obviously comes to mind, that sort of thing. There's a seriousness to those post-apocalyptic films where you're kind of like, even A Boy and His Dog was like, it's not wholly serious. It's kind of, gross. But the actual end of the world element, the post-apocalypsing, is taken kind of serious. Like the impact whatever is taken serious, whether it be the struggle for gasoline or sex or water or whatever. Like the post-apocalypse, it's almost like when you do like a horror comedy and they say, well, the horror's got to be straight. The comedy can be there, but the horror's got to be horror.
Right.
I feel like with apocalypse films, like the apocalypse has got to be a proper apocalypse. You've got to feel the consequences of it, and you don't in this in the slightest.
Yeah, you get one line about how a comet hit the planet.
Yeah.
And water scarce, but not only so. I mean, the thing about like Malcolm McDowell wasting the water, is that I'm fine with that if it's depicted as like a level of affluence and corruption, right?
Which is what I
it's
think they're
not.
going for.
Again, like it's not. It's
Mhm.
just he's crazy, but not entertaining crazy. But then I'm like, this is the most incompetently run corporation ever.
Yeah.
Why are they threatening? I mean, but then it's also just like Malcolm McDowell says, has that guy take off his boots. and walk on glass that
Mm.
he's shattered these displays, right? In a sort of like melodramatic display that doesn't quite work. And then he has the guy take off his boots and then derides him for obeying his orders. And you have these sort of Bruce Willis walking across glass scene. Except he tells the guy to take off his boots, and then the guy takes off his socks too.
Yeah.
Why is he taking off his socks? And it's like, was there a cut drop line there? Like, what is going on? And then suddenly Malcolm McDowell's in his barefoot. And you're like, when did he become barefoot?
Yeah.
What is going on in this movie? Like, I literally have no idea. I mean, it's just like bad editing like that. There's another scene later after he's injured where he's, it's the like, we're going to put in the cybernetic implants kind of scene. Well, he's with the doctors, and the scene opens with the doctors telling him what's going on and leveling with him about his condition. And 2 lines of dialogue later, give or take, he says, "So what's the prognosis, doctor?" And then
that bothered me.
Nobody answers him.
Yeah.
And there, just like the establishing shot, the glass stuff, the prognosis stuff, there are so many scenes like that where I'm like, this was assembled by an alien who did not understand human brains. Like,
It's one of those
was
weird
this
things.
a mental patient
I
in
don't
making
know,
this
but
movie?
it's one of those where that scene in particular made me chuckle because he does get he gets given all the information and then says, "What's the prognosis?" And she just sort of say, "It's bad." And I'm like, "Yeah, you've just told him that. Like, you've literally just told him he's gonna die. Like, this is weird." But then James Hong turns up, and I love James Hong in everything he's in. I'm like, he's cool. So then I'm like, all right. That's kind of sort of like distracted me because I'm like, there's I like them. But this led to, you see about this editing choice, right? Because you see that this part of this thing is James Hong comes in and says, "We've got this metal arm," and then you see him with these big clamps. And he's going to cut his head off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see why. But then the rest of the film, they hide the head.
Yeah.
And then eventually the third act is revealed and he has a normal head, but then you find out it's a hologram. And you go, cool. Why did you hide that in several of the scenes then? Because that
agree.
Because that makes
like,
no
this
sense.
This is the one non-interesting part of his body. This is the one normal part, and that's the part that you've hit it.
Yeah.
Like, is that a meta joke on like making fun of the cinematic technique of I don't even understand.
No,
I
have
know. The same.
I was really
I
curious.
Don't know what's going on. Like,
yeah.
I mean, there is this level of just like, you know what I'm saying? Like, like there's a version of this that's gonzo and, where the lines work and it's edited better and it still probably would have flopped, but we would watch it today and say like, this is so gonzo and balls to the wall that like it is amazing and, ahead of its time. But then it's stuff like this that just, makes me think like, I kind of get that it's going for that gonzo thing, but it's clearly like made by a brain that isn't functioning correctly.
I think one of the things is there are 2 ways of doing this, as you say, like, because there's the gonzo, the whole Tank Girl side has got to be gonzo. That's got to be like, have all your animation, have all your montages and your sort of like your fourth wall breaking, those sort of side looks, all that kind of stuff. Have at it, right? The rest of the film, the other side, needs to be either fully straight, like don't have Malcolm McDowell, don't have him being a Howard Cackling villain. Like, get someone who you think is proper menacing, proper organized, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking like Ronnie Cox is in like RoboCop. You go like, there's the crazy side of the villains, and RoboCop is nuts. But Ronnie Cox kind of feels like, you wouldn't mess with him. You know what I mean? Like, you have that kind of thing. Or you have to, like you say, embrace the gonzo-ness, and the whole film has to be, and everything you apply to Tank Girl, you kind of have to apply elsewhere. Or it doesn't work. But this is I think that this would have worked better and should have worked better if you had that straight, where it was like, oh no, the other side of this is played by a straight actor. We've brought in, someone who's a thespian, who's a known actor to play it straight and to play the thing. Don't go full out crazy. Do let that happen normally? I don't know. It just would have balanced it out, but yeah, it feels
Yeah.
silly. This is do you remember Super Mario Brothers with Bob Hoskins?
Yes,
It has that same sensibility, doesn't it? Where they're like,
I agree.
right, we've got Bob, John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins playing Mario and Luigi, and that's crazy, and they're going to do all this other stuff, and then we're going to have Dennis Hopper play King Koopa,
Hmm.
and he's going to play it like a nutcase as well, and so it's all crazy, and then so then like other actors in it are going to get kind of lost in the shuffle.
Well, but the problem with the straight idea, which is, I agree with you that would work, is you've got the kangaroos. And
Yes.
if you include the kangaroos, which obviously are there in the comic, now you're in a crazy world with
Yeah.
mutant animals,
Which is fine,
like,
but
you
they
want you
exist.
think that you can play that straight?
No. You can. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you can. I mean, I think I think fair play. Like for 1995 and for the budget they had, I actually think I'm impressed with the prosthetics they did. Well done to them. Like it's not
Yeah, I don't
great,
disagree with that.
fair
It's
play
not
to them.
great, but yeah,
But
sure.
it's a good attempt at what they wanted to do, and it works in places. Yes, you could, and the reason you can, I mean, they have to look better, but you can because when they're the Rippers and they're in their armor and like that's played straight. When they're on, they're on. Like they are dangerous and they are, like a unit. And like think Ninja
Are they?
Turtles. Well, this is what I'm saying.
Are they?
But no,
I
no,
mean,
they're not. But they should be. This is what I'm saying. They should be.
okay, yeah, okay,
Think Ninja
right,
Turtles. All
right,
right,
okay.
where you'll
Okay,
say where you're like, oh, when they're off and they're playing around, they're daft and there's kind of jokes and they're gonna be that. But when they're fighting, like, the violence and the fighting is well choreographed. I mean, I think that 1990 film is really good in that same way that like it will play that thing and go, oh no, they're this is what I'm saying. Oh no, they are ninjas. They are
hmm,
skilled. So when they do their
right.
stuff, they do their stuff. There's no messing around. But when they're off, like they're throwing
They're
pizza at each
goofing
other, they're
around.
goofing
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
This should feel the same. Oh, when they're off, they'll goof around and they'll fight, and sort of Ice T's character gets, T Saint gets pissed off, and Dog or whatever he's called gets Booger gets sort of like can be is the Michelangelo, but when they're in gear and they are in battle mode, they are a force to be reckoned with. Like it should feel like that. There's a line to cross, but it never does.
yeah,
It does at some points you feel it, but then when he gets to the finale, all that goes out the window again, where it's sort of like, oh no, they're a joke.
yeah. No, I mean that whole raid scene at the end is just ridiculous and painful to watch, and yeah.
But
I
you've
mean, I
been
would say,
told, but before that, you've been told. Even the opening, you see, like Rebecca Tank Girl sort of goes through and says, "Oh, rippers," and you see people have been ripped
mhm,
apart. A plane's been brought down. You're like, "Oh shit, these things are serious. Like these are dangerous."
right.
They are set up to be, they feel that they are set up to be dangerous, and they should be. So when you see them, then it should be like, but we're cool and chill at the rest of the time. I don't know. It feels like this is what I'm saying about like Talalay does not have a vision of how to divide these things up.
Well, I agree with you. That was one of the things I was going to point out, that, like, the Rippers are depicted as, a dangerous crack unit of monsters or something.
Mm,
And then you meet them and it's like, oh, they're utterly incompetent.
yeah.
You know, but the thing is, water and power is the same way.
Yes.
Like, they're sort of like, oh, this is this crack, military organization. And they're utterly incompetent from start to finish, can't shoot straight, run by a dictator who, in the real world would be overthrown in 2 days, you know. I mean, there's nothing about this that works in my mind. And it's not just that, like, Malcolm McDowell is wasting water. I should say there's nothing about this that works. There are a few scenes I'll point out, but the costuming, especially of Tank Girl and that tank and stuff like that, works. The musical number is my
Yeah,
favorite
love
part
it.
of the movie.
Amazing.
And I love its suspension of reality, which is common to musicals, right? Like, I mean, that is the best part of the movie. And I love Cole Porter.
Mm. Mhm.
So, uh, yeah, I love that stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. It's sort of like this has to either be a totally gonzo movie that it sometimes is, but mostly that stuff doesn't work, or it's got to be a real threat and real stakes, and the water's dire and life is terrible. And instead, everybody just seems to be partying. Everybody seems to be stupid, yet it wants to kind of have stakes and stuff like that. And um, the bottom line is just doesn't work. It's just not fun for me. Um,
See, I
I
have
don't
the
know what's
fun.
fun.
I have the fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy the sort of the scenes of like, I mean, maybe I'm just sort of, I'm not, I'm kind of tuned into the kind of the I don't want to use the phrase wacky because I hate it, but like, there's a fun to this I have that like you say, that dance number's fun.
Oh yeah.
I actually really like Laurie Petty in this. I think the costume is great. I think she looks great. I think there's a sort of like, when it has like the montage of them putting the tank together and stuff, and it does like different speeds. I mean, I'm just sort of like, this is a fun idea. Like, it's not, the thing is, it's swinging for the fences, it's trying something new, for a comic book film and trying to have a sensibility and an attitude. And I'm like, cool, go for it. That's great. Yeah, you try these things like the animation and the comic cut scenes, and even sort of like some of the fourth wall breaking and some of the weird montages and it being like female led and all this other stuff. I'm like, cool, all this is good. Like, I'm kind of on board with all this. Laurie Petty just has an energy. Like when she gets to the dance place and she's sort of trying all the different costumes on, and it's all kind of like, it's all silly, but I'm like, it's silly in a way. I'm like, yeah, cool. It feels kind of authentic to her. The problem is, as you say, every time I try and engage with the narrative, it falls apart. Like, this world doesn't exist. We've said before, like when we've gone through these apocalypse films, I use again because it's Australian. Let me use Mad Max as an example, right?
Yes. Which is the closest to this,
Yeah, it is.
right? I mean,
I'd say so.
crazy.
Yeah.
This has some of that same crazy design work, except it doesn't feel lived in here, right?
No,
I mean,
that's the difference. Where they sort of
yeah.
like when even up for that third one, but when you get beyond Thunderdome and you go to Bartertown, and it has that same sort of craziness where you've got the Undertown, and you've got like Master Blaster, and you've got like all the guards that wear like the weird sort of red mohawks and chaps, and then you've got people trading in weird stuff, like all that. You go like, this is weird and wacky, and they knew, like, the thing with Miller, he knew the tone. He was like, here's what's crazy, here's what's kind of going to be played straight. So, we're going to have some lunacy in this, but you can also have moments of jeopardy. So, yes, I'm going to have Tina Turner slide down from her platform on a chair to get down to the Thunderdome, right? And you're going to have some weird rules. But you're also going to have a moment like, then you're going to have a fight, and Max is going to have the shit kicked out of him. Like, you're going to feel that in the Thunderdome. Like, you feel that that's like, there are moments, and then you have that moment of empathy when he pulls off the blaster's helmet, and he's revealed to be basically, a big guy but with learning disabilities, and you're like, okay, and that's, you feel that. It gives you that whack, but it's still in a crazy world. Like, he knows how to balance that tone, and I think he does it across all of them, really. This doesn't have that, because it's sort of like everything's a joke, everything's going to be funny. And so when things go wrong, when you actually feel where you're supposed to feel empathy, it's the sympathy or kind of some sort of emotion, it never resonates because everything's a joke.
Yeah. I mean, but everything's a joke, but the jokes don't land. Like, I don't feel like this is a gonzo, crazy, don't take it so seriously kind of movie. It sort of is, and then it's not.
Yeah.
We have kangaroo politics, except it just doesn't really work. I mean, and I was thinking about like her quips, and after she's taken prisoner and she's, for some reason Sauron, takes tremendous interest in her. Is totally focused on breaking her.
Yeah.
Even then, nothing works, nothing makes sense. I don't know why he's taken such an interest in her. They say, like, look at her on the video screen, she's stealing the tank, except then you find out the tank doesn't work. So why is somebody reporting she's stealing a tank? I mean, they see clearly Girl is a traitor on the camera, yet do nothing about it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things like that just don't make sense, and they're not deliberate. They're just editing problems.
Oh no,
They're
that's not
just,
that's not an editing problem. That's a plot problem.
okay.
That whole escape is dreadful. That's the almost like the lowest point of the film for me, where I'm like, this is where I'm like, they're watching them escape. Nothing's happening. Besides, we're going to break her. This will be interesting. Hang on, no, what? Like, this is an easy escape. It makes no sense. It's kind of silly. Like, it doesn't feel earned in any way.
But even when she's prisoner, she's sort of, she's kept prisoner, and, Sauron takes an interest in her. And, she just has quips, right? She has shows no fear of death, no, concern for what's happened to her, nor any concern for all of her friends who have been murdered, which is a little odd, but, I'll go with it. But the quips aren't funny. And the villains, like, in other words, like James Bond makes quips, but he's in a universe in which there are real consequences. So his quips are kind of like his way of dealing with it, and being superior to it. Mad Max, it's like, it's a rugged, terrible world. The characters are all weird, but they're weird because they've all been broken by this world already, and it's a consistent point of view. She makes quips where she shouldn't, where, she shows like she seems to care. She will stop and say, well, that seems like a good idea when she's caught. But then why do you show no concern whatsoever when you clearly have concern at other points? The villain's idea of torturing somebody is to put them into a long pipe that we're told gets narrower as like, but there's no cord attached to them, but then there is at the end. But pulling somebody out is as easy as pulling, like, a toy out from, a tube. I mean, somebody's being drowned, but the water clearly isn't, getting very high. I mean, there's another way of wasting water. We're gonna concoct something that's going to drown somebody in the maximum water volume possible. Of all of the, think about James Bond, all of the death traps you could come up with, like a pipe is what you came up with in a movie that's so gonzo. I don't know. I mean, I feel like and most of the quips are like a pop culture reference, or like a bad pun. But they're not. Occasionally they're delivered with a bit of panache, but sometimes they're not.
No.
Sometimes it feels like, she's still getting a feel for the character.
I agree with that. Like, there's one of the things, going back to this, just to sort of emphasize your point about this, one of the things that did irk me, because I was carried along with this film, and I think that's my thing. I'm going to say, like, I was smiling and enjoying sort of like the experience.
This is your Alien Resurrection.
Yes, exactly. Actually, in that kind of way, yeah. But one of the things that kind of bothered me, like you say, she's a prisoner. She works down in the mines, right? I'm not sure entirely what they're mining. I think they're trying to get to the new water table, so they're trying to get down to water. I think, possibly, doesn't explain that. But then she's like wandering around the facility, aimless, like freely. She goes into the bathrooms, into the toilets, and she sort of comes across Jet Girl in the cubicles. Then she's dragged out. But then she's also having like a powder shower at one point, and she's able to intercede like a sexual assault on Jet Girl. Like, it all feels very like, who? Where's your cell? Where do you, like, shouldn't you be like under guard? Like, this feels really like you just wander around this facility. Are you actually a prisoner? Like, I don't understand. Then she's able to like go to where the tanks are. But it never feels like an escape. And this is part of my problem with this film. As you said, you made it with the Bond at the point, there are no consequences in this film. Nothing has consequences. Right. Like, nothing is kind of like, all right, this is the escape plan. This is my plan. I'm going to steal a tank and do this. But like, okay, but to do that, I've got to escape from my cell to do this, or I've got to escape from the guards or whatever. Like, it never really goes anywhere. It all sort of just happens. And as you were talking and you were saying about the quips and that sort of thing, Bugs Bunny comes to mind in that sense of like, even Bugs Bunny will be like, he'll be like, what's up, Doc? And he'll make puns and jokes and he'll make people feel silly because he can outsmart them. But then Elmer Fudd will stick a double barrel shotgun up his nose and you'll get, and Bugs is like, oh shit, like, I've crossed, how am I going to get out of this one? It feels like, Fudd's an idiot and Bugs is going to outsmart him. But there's still the potential of like, it's a Looney Tune cartoon, so it's not going to happen. But like, still, Bugs feels like
Right.
I'm going to have my head blown off. Like it's duck season, rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season. Like they know there could be potential consequences. There's none of that in this. It kind of everything feels kind of like everyone feels like a stormtrooper in a Star Wars stormtrooper. It's like no one can aim properly. They all just shoot randomly. Like I don't know. Yeah, you're right. This is what I'm saying. A lot of this feels silly in that respect. Like almost like pop with bubble gum. Like there's no real weight to anything.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that mine scene. That mine scene drives me crazy. I hate it so much. And we see that she's mining. So again, like she's a prisoner. She's being forced to do labor, right? So I get it. You're the quippy person, but presumably you don't like this. So I mean, she makes quips about like, well, I don't think I'll stay. Well, I guess I will, and I guess we're supposed to be charmed by that wonderful dialogue. But you see her mining. She doesn't show that she doesn't like it. She just is doing it. And then somebody takes her bucket that she's mined and pours it over her as she's climbing out of the mine to be pointlessly cruel. And if that scene had happened in, say, a Mad Max movie, you'd say, oh, that stormtrooper, that, mine enforcer is a psychologically sadistic person, right? And maybe he shouldn't be part of that crew, but he is. And, here it just feels like, yeah, water and power is incompetent. You're wasting water. You're having people mine, and then you throw out the contents of what they mine. Like I don't understand anything that's happening. Water's valuable, yet even her band of people have, the second you see inside their house, it's a greenhouse. There's stuff growing everywhere. I mean, this looks at like all the alien movies where like there's so much copious water on the spaceships, and it's like we're gonna have water in every scene. I don't understand this choice. I don't understand. Even your mines seem to be like designed to waste the material that you're mining. I don't understand this stuff. I don't know. I really am bothered by that. And it's and it doesn't know how to take it except like, well, that's cruelty, except we're not asked to understand that it's sadism on the part of this person or the product of a warped psychology, or that it accentuates the trauma of her having to work the mines, because there is no trauma. She's not permitted trauma, because that would mean that she actually has stakes. So why do we have that scene?
Well, but this comes to the whole thing. Why is there any plot? Because this is the weakest part of this film is the plot. Like whenever they're doing something silly, I'm kind of enjoying it. Like it's kind of fun, it's kind of daft, and I'm like, it's almost like a clip show. Like Family Guy is a really good reference point for this, because it is. It's like, here's a silly thing. We've made the tank look cool, and I'm sort of like, even in that scene where they do the tank up, like her costume changes throughout that montage. And it's kind of like, it shows how like, irreverent and silly it's wanting to be. And she just goes, oh, so the whole film is this. This is the point. But again, I feel that like, you said that there's a gem of a film in here. If they'd have had the balls to actually say, right, we are going to take this character that we know does this, but we have to, because we're doing it as a film in the 90s. We're going to have to give it an arc. We're going to have to give it a plot that works. And literally have it as sort of like, have that thing in it of. And I'm not saying give her an origin story and the events at the start of the film is what makes her crazy. I'm not asking for that. I'm not saying, but like she needs to feel, like the That needs
Some
to have a
sense of
consequence.
stakes.
Sense of stakes. I mean, there needs to be
Right.
like that thing that happened at the beginning of the film where her not paying attention whilst on watch
Hmm.
needs to come up throughout the film. Like Jet Girl needs to find out about it and challenge it. I don't talk about that. Like, we don't, that's not something, I lost because of this. So like everything that's silly is now just me plowing forwards. We don't go back. I only go forwards. Like,
Right.
it needs to be a part of that. Like until and when she finds out that Sam, the little girl, is alive, that she's now got to confront this of like, oh shit, okay, well now actually I can't keep running because I've got to go back and face the consequences of this, and I've got to put myself at jeopardy. I can still be the crazy, irreverent tank girl and have a crazy tank with a, bobblehead on it and a picture of Salvador Dali and all this other shit, whatever you want to do it. Do all of that, but now it's employed in this thing of redeeming myself for what went wrong at the beginning
Right.
against water and power. That needs to be, and it's not even, I mean, that's cliched and rote in itself,
Sure.
but it would have allowed me to go, oh, the plot's okay. I can see now where the plot is anchored. The escape was her wanting to get away and just live this life in the sort of in the wastes and become Max, but like
Hmm.
not Mad Max, but well, yeah, basically her version of Max. Like she wants to live free in the world. We can live this crazy life, just me and Jet Girl, go off and do these things, woo! But then she has to sort of face up to the consequences and has to go back and be dragged from the wilderness to go and confront these things again. Like this isn't hard. It's not. It's
Yeah.
like 4 degrees away from what it is. It's there.
Yeah. I think it's more than that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the stuff that works in this movie is the stuff that is over the top and for the most part works, right? Like the musical number. I mean, I think
If you can keep all of that. I mean, this is where one of the reasons I think Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn has been so successful. And I think this is a similar sort of thing. It was like, they have basically sort of, they for all the sort of the things that happened, and this idea of sort of Harley is a consequence of this, damaged relationship with the Joker, but now they have gone through this sort of evolution and she's regained her power and regained her agency, and now she can sort of, she can join the Suicide Squad and she can join the Birds of Prey or whatever. All of that is the best thing that could have happened to her, because then you have this character that is free to do whatever she wants. And she can do all those things. I've seen those films. They're not all great, right?
right.
But
For sure.
in those films, the character of Harley has kind of a bit of an arc and consequence.
She stands out.
She stands out where she can do all that crazy wacky shit. I mean,
yes.
The scene of in Guns.
Let's be clear. I mean, the Suicide Squad is the only movie featuring her that is any good at all.
The James Gunn one.
Yeah, the James Gunn one. But I mean, like Birds of Prey is a textbook definition for like what not to do in a movie. But it makes the Suicide Squad look like it makes the first Suicide Squad look like a masterpiece in comparison. But she stands out, and she is contrasted to the realistic stakes of
exactly. And this is what I'm saying. When you can sort of have her, and you have in that first film in particular, yes, they have that sort of I don't know, her version, the hot pants, all that kind of stuff, whatever. But when you put her up against kind of Will Smith's Deadshot and all those other things, you're right, she stands out, and you can go, oh, you can have that wackiness. And even in Birds of Prey, you can have her against oh God, my whole head's just blanks. But that thing that does it again, where they have pretty straight characters, where they're like, oh, we've got how is it I'm not remembering these bloody DC characters?
No, I mean, there's nothing to remember about that.
No,
except horrible sets. I mean, we can't even remember who the villain is.
No, but they have Black Canary, and they have and Black Mask is the sort of the character of the bank with
Black Mask,
with Chris what's it screw it, who cares? Anyway, but she's great, and she has that consistent character. And again, in one of the you watch James Gunn's version when she has that escape from the the whatever, and it's like the fight scene. There's it erupts with flowers, and she has the mallet, and she has all the guns. Fantastic. She's brilliant.
Absolutely.
but it stands out as being like, oh, her scenes are weird. Like she's in her own little world and it's completely disjointed and it's fine. But then you've still got like these other characters looking on, like Idris Elba's character going like, what the fuck? Like, who is this kind of craziness? This should have that same thing where you should be going like her craziness should win out
Right.
because like water and power are like we have weapons, we have numbers, we have power, blah blah blah. But we can't seem to do anything against her because she is so unpredictable. She's skilled but unpredictable. Like that should be
Yeah.
the way this goes.
And fearless.
And fearless. Like
Yeah.
but then they feel kind of like wacky and silly and all that other stuff as well. And
Yes.
so it all feels silly. But they should feel like a legit. Do you know what I'm getting at with this whole thing?
Yeah, I do. And like you said, I think there's two ways of taking this. I do think you can also make a movie that's all sort of vignettes that sort of doesn't take a plot as seriously. None of the Mad Max movies, except for the first one, have any kind of origin. You don't necessarily need an origin. Or you could address it in the first vignette and be done with it, and then just have her be a wacky character who has, wacky adventures, and maybe the villain at the end is from earlier, so you have a little bit of an arc, to satisfy movie audiences. But those vignettes that work are so few and far between. I think you're right that's probably the more realistic way to do it, is probably the way to do it. But then, of course, you need the sort of like Spielbergian, character to marvel at how she's able to do this, like how unpredictable she is, and fearless and all of that. You need that gape, of that awe, of the gaping mouth and shock of her. Or you just need to have it be a farce from start to finish. And some of the farcical stuff doesn't really work. But also most of it is not a farce. Like most of it is sort of like, I don't know. But I do think it's like the farcical stuff that sticks in my mind, right? I mean, I don't think anything else really works, but it's those moments when it's a farce that really work for me. But even then, some of them don't really quite work. It alternates.
I just think, yes, I agree. And I think, if you're going to go full gonzo, you look at those kinds of films that have done that. And even then, are you going to go full satire? Are you going to go Verhoeven? Are you going to go Gilliam? Are you going to go, how weird and sort of like gonzo are you going to go? And I don't know, that for me.
You mentioned Looney Tunes. This could be done, it's a later movie, it's a later aesthetic. But I mean, you could do a movie like Shoot 'Em Up, starring Tank Girl. That's so much fun and just crazy. And it's not a realistic world. And that's probably closer to the comics. And, that's fine. But it's so entertaining. It just works minute by minute, right? Instead of just being puzzling.
But that needs to be choreographed, doesn't it? Even it's one of those things that I always, I think I feel this is true. Like you see films that are like comedies that you go, oh, a lot of this was improvised. It was kind of loose, but the people know each other. You get like, sort of like Ben Stiller and sort of like, Seth Rogen and those kind of guys. You can go, Steve Carell and those kind of guys where you go, oh, they're funny and they're, they can ad lib and they can do like Will Farrell's one, the Anchorman, like barely has a plot, like but like it has some
jumps from scene to scene,
scene to scene, but like you watch it and going like, this is a loose film. It kind of is just, it's based on the fact that these guys know each other and they're riffing on each other and they're clear. Like the script was probably about 4 pages. Like, this is just kind of what they're doing. Fantastic. And it works and it's funny.
It's fun. It works.
Yeah, it's fun. And it kind of works. But if you're going to do that and you want to do it and you're not going to have those kinds of guys in it, then it needs to be even more you have to go completely almost like the other way. You have to edit this and you have to orchestrate
Mhm.
it and um choreograph it to such an extent that almost like that it feels spontaneous and you can, but actually you realize it isn't. Like, there's an awful lot of work that's gone into making this feel spontaneous, but it's not. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And you'd have to really work at that. I think you could do it. I'm sure there are films that I've watched and really enjoyed and thought, oh, that was so off the cuff, but it wasn't.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I
But
don't
that
know.
depends on like delivery, editing, and
Mm,
the
mm,
delivery isn't here. And so many of these lines, even Tank Girl's quips, Lori Petty sometimes seems comfortable in her own skin, and
mm,
then sometimes in the next scene doesn't, and seems like she's delivering a line that's kind of a bad line, and then the next line she'll be amazing at.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I find even that I find even her presentation, inconsistent.
The funny thing is, whenever she's sort of like on her own, as in like when she's sort of stood not with the tank. So you said when they go in and they're doing the dance number, or even when they're doing like the photo shoot bit, and she's just sort of like doing a bit. I think she's really good. I think she's funny and it's fine. And there's a little vignettes with the tank that work. But the moment she has to jump into action, like actual action, and they
Mm,
give her a gun, like it's clear like she's never
yeah.
carried a gun before. Like it really looks awkward and clunky, and they could have just taken aside and said, right, we're going to get 5 days of you and here's weapons training because they clearly said this isn't that important. Here's a gun, fire away, and she holds it funny. It's just like she's aiming like miles away from wherever's going on. It looks terrible, but she needs to look like a badass. So yeah, that stuff is where it sort of irritates me a bit. But yeah, when she's off just doing her little vignettes on her own, she's actually kind of good.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some sequences where she's doing wacky stuff, but I'm thinking, what are the water and power guys doing during, like, you're dead. Like I again and again, I'm like, yeah, you're dead. Like, there's just too much time. And the other thing that we've remarked upon especially in Fury Road is,
Mm,
look, I am the biggest fan of animated sequences and breaking up cinema and rapid cutting, and um, it's not the only stuff I like, but I mean, I really think the power of that is underestimated. The same thing, when we talked about Fury Road and how speeding up scenes, slowing them down, controlling the pace. I mean, you can do a lot with that to really improve a performance and really make it seem,
hmm.
screwing with time, especially in a kind of farcical, universe like this, if you're going that direction. But they don't do that. And so often I'm thinking like, okay, what she's doing is kind of farcical and entertaining, but all my brain is thinking about is you're dead right now.
Yeah,
Like, this took too long. You're not you could speed it up, you can cut it better. My brain should not be thinking of those things. I
I
don't care
think.
that it's unrealistic, but I'm distracted from what should be a charming sequence. And like the interior of the tank was brilliantly
Hmm.
designed. You
Mm.
know, it should be fun that she's putting beer cans, in the tank. You know, instead, I'm thinking, how much time is this taking? Like,
Well, no, I think that's the thing is there are. Um, I'm just looking at some of the images and some of the scenes that, for exactly what you say, there are scenes that work in that way when you're sort of like it's almost disconnected from the plot. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that, and sort of. I think the dance number is one of my favorite, and not that whole sort of scene where she's sort of like dancing around the technology and trying on the clothes, and there's another one, even like her interactions with the kangaroo guys. All that I'm kind of like cool, but again, the moment he goes into action, like, and this should actually have like if you're gonna have a tank and a jet, like you need to have your action tied down, which I think was less of an issue in the 90s. But like to me, like they're gonna steal. Okay, they end up having to steal the um goods, whatever the cargo is, to
yeah,
ingratiate themselves to the kangaroo guys. So they're like, "Cool, we're going to do this thing." So there's a whole scene where they sort of like the tank races up and she's on the barrel and it hovers next to them.
This is your Mad Max scene, right? I mean, this
Yes,
is your
this is it.
hijacking of that, right? This
Well,
is
no, it's
straight out of Mad Max.
It's 100% Mad Max. Up until she's on that tank and she's like on the barrel and she's leaning there and she's sort of quipping. All of that I'm fine with. It's kind of fun. It's feeling of a piece, like the barrel coming through the driver's side window.
That's cool. Yeah,
That was cool. That was funny. Like I was like, that's funny. But the moment she's got to engage in the sort of the fighting of it, like again, you just go, oh, nobody here knows how to shoot action. Nobody here knows
Yes.
how to choreograph this. This looks sloppy.
Well,
It looks messy. She's firing the gun all over the place. She'd be dead in 3 minutes. This
yeah.
is ridiculous. And then she sort of manages to do it all, and then she sort of takes off the front and like jumps. And even that, I'm like, this is
Yeah,
so
the jump is terrible. I mean,
yes,
and clearly there's like a board on the side of that
yeah,
tank, which is fine. It looks
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
I'm not going to complain. But that looks kind of cool. Like she's in a surfing position on the tank
Mm.
turret. That looks cool. But then it cuts to, like a quick shot of the jump, and suddenly and I'm thinking, what's happening to the tank? And you never so the jump is terrible. You're right. The action is terrible. I mean, and comparing this to Mad Max is, like Miller knows how to shoot that, right?
Oh,
Miller would be shooting this, and would be like, yeah, there's a 50% chance you're gonna die, Lord Petty.
yes.
Like, I mean,
Hold on to this stick, and I'm going to spin you around, and that's it. Yeah.
yeah, and then but I'm thinking like the tank has nobody driving it. Like I guess it's being remote controlled,
Well,
but
it's sentient.
suddenly
It's got a brain in it.
I don't know. I don't understand this. I mean, but then suddenly she's back on the tank at the end. Like she kind of fights a few guys, but
Mm-hmm.
then she's not only back on the tank, but it's accelerated past this tanker truck so that she can rotate the gun 45 degrees into the cab.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, when does she get back on the tank? And again, like you should have, like, I know you're limited by budget, but I mean, like, so you can't necessarily have like an overhead drone shot of the tank veering off or something, but there needs to be a shot of her getting back on the tank. There needs to be, a shot of the tank veering off. There needs to be, I mean, these are just like simple mechanics of how you shoot a movie
Well, it's
that
the
this
same.
movie does not know.
No, and this is the thing with action. Every time there's an action scene in this, like you say, it's half an action scene because all the establishing stuff, that, as you just said, the sort of like how it comes up, how she gets off, like that should be just as much as a problem. Like this is the things that happen. It's the same at the end. The final scene again, it's like ideas they've got. This is a cool idea. She's going to paraglide off the back of her tank as it comes up, and then she's going to get shot at, and then she's going to parachute down and she's going to shoot at people. That sounds like a cool idea. And if this was Margot Robbie doing this as Harley Quinn in a modern film, it would look ace. I have no doubt about it. It would look fantastic, and they would get a director that would do the action amazingly, as you said, like drone shots and spinning, rotating around the action. This cuts from two guys stood in basically a scaffold shooting up in the air. Cuts then to Laurie Petty coming down as Tank Girl shooting down, and you go, I assume they're shooting at each other because there's no bullets passing each other. This is clearly two different shots that you've done that you haven't put together. And then it kind of just gets to the next bit, and you're like, I assume all this sort of came together. The moment this is action, and the same for the fight scene at the end. Anytime there's a fight scene in any way, like it kind of just feels like they can't figure out how to make it look good, so they're not going to do it.
Yeah, there's a kind of like half-assed feel to it.
It's not the point of the film, but it's kind of the film they've written.
That's true. And I mean, there's a lot of violence in those Tank Girl comics, right? There's part of the fun is how over the top that stuff is. Not in every strip, but yeah, you should be able to show this kind of stuff. Isn't there a paragliding, like kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger is that in Commando, where he sort of like is elevated and just like mowing everyone down, and it's totally unrealistic. right? Like you're just like, oh yeah. Like, first of all, this paraglider is just going to be chewed up in a second. You're going to follow your death. But it kind of works. And there's a medium shot, right? Of, different people. They're clearly aiming at the paraglider, but you're just cutting in a way that makes it look like Arnold Schwarzenegger is, a ninja at aiming, like he's just so good. And they can't pull that off here. Even that gives you some sense of place, right? That this is lacking. And you're right. I have the same sense of like, this is an idea you had. And kudos for it being over the top, for the tank girl character, for this being, I won't say girl power, but for this being a, presentation of a female action hero in those moments. Kudos for trying that. But the actual footage that's turned in and the way it's edited together is so lackluster and so lacking in basic objective ways that it's hard to. It just leaves me kind of scratching my head, wondering like, what is the effect that you wanted to achieve here? I honestly don't know. But I feel the same way about some of her quips. I mean, I feel the same way about Tank Girl's character. That I want to like her. I want to like this kind of like irreverent, in your face, potentially offensive. Good, go for that. I'm all for it. Maybe want to like is the wrong, way to phrase it. But I want to be charmed by it. And I'm surprised by, it's sometimes charming and sometimes just not. I do think you're right about the action. I mean, the fight with Sauron, it's like, Malcolm McDowell basically stands still and stumbles around.
Eesh.
And that metal, like spiky hand of his is like, there's one time where he like threatens her with it. The rest of the time, it just gets stuck to things and causes him problems.
It's pointless. It's a real useless tool that he just can't seem to get his head around how to use. That end fight is dreadful. And again, this is one of those things where if it was played right and you had someone, Malcolm McDowell's too old, get someone younger. And if he has had these like cybernetic implants and stuff, this final fight should feel like the consequences of this. Like she's determined she has to get through him to get to Sam. But there's a real threat he might win, and she has to do something. She has to rely on her zaniness to win the fight because he's very predictable and all this other stuff, and so she has to do something crazy that's gonna, he can't predict. Like it has to have something to do that. But yeah, it's awful. Look, it's one of those things where I've started watching, you watch a lot of like 80s, 70s and 80s action films before choreography became like important. And you watch these extras
before like the John Woo, sort of like wire work stuff came in.
Yeah, but even before that, like you'll have like the martial arts star, let's say like Chuck Norris or Michael Dudikoff. They look good because they know what they're doing because they're martial artists. And then you have these extras that clearly don't, but have been told you're going to get hit, so fall over. So they just go and fall over, and you go, okay, we haven't quite got there with stunt choreography yet. It's kind of people have gone, but that's a hard floor. I don't want to fall down on that. I'll do it slowly. That's what this feels like, where they've gone, here's what we want to do. Neither of you have got any fighting experience. And here's the environment. And it's not even, it's actually kind of, there are mechanics and there's props and stuff around you. So they haven't choreographed it. So they've just gone, well, we're going to shoot this and we're going to shoot that. And it looks so slow and staged and rigid and stiff that it's so off-putting.
Yeah, and there's no sense of stakes. There's no sense of threat there. I mean, Malcolm McDowell menaces her with the arm that then, a minute later, you're like, this is clearly a liability. Like, the Toxic Avenger would have done this better. I mean, that that works better in terms of gonzo, fight scenes.
I'm looking at the year this came out. This came out in 1995. And I was just curious because I'm like, oh, I'm judging it on this, judging it on that. I was like, maybe it's this. This is the same year as GoldenEye. We mentioned James Bond, right? So this is the same year as GoldenEye, in which James Bond goes through St. Petersburg in a tank in an amazing scene. I mean, that's a great scene. That chase with the tank is amazing. Same year as Batman Forever. So if you want to go gonzo, I mean, that granted had like, Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones doing something completely extra. But like, again, that's a different kind of sort of way to go. It's the same year as Judge Dredd. This isn't like we're going, oh, this is new territory. Like there are versions of this already going on in the same year. It just feels kind of.
I mean, Judge Dredd is a better shot, better made movie.
Oh yeah, same year as Waterworld. Just gonna put same year as Mortal Kombat. And that's that's one of those sort of films where you go, Mortal Kombat, yeah, it's rubbish, but I kind of like the fights in it because they knew how to shoot a fight. Because that's what the point of the film was. Like the drama and the acting, mostly terrible, but some of the fights look really cool. This film sort of like sits in amongst all these films where I'm going, yeah, it's not surprising that this sort of fell foul of all this because it just doesn't sort of know. We've just said about Margot Robbie being, you said about Margot Robbie being Harley Quinn and standing out from all the others. And she does, and she's fantastic at doing that. This doesn't stand out and didn't stand out and didn't do well because it's not doing what it wants to do well compared to all those other films that were doing this. I was just saying, like Desperado came out this year, which is a young, Robert Rodriguez, where it's like we're going to do a dense film and we're going to do really well choreographed violence and gunplay and all this other stuff, and you go, cool, the plot's kind of insane and stupid, but do you know what? It looks amazing, and it's so it's not like these other films can't do this. It's just kind of like, it just kind of misses the point, doesn't it? It kind of misses the field. It's weird.
Yeah, I also, I think a lot about what causes a movie to work or not. And, I talk about like that movie magic. And I've been on a Tim Burton kick recently and, doing some writing about it. And it's amazing to me how sort of those early Burton movies, I mean, every line in Pee-wee's Big Adventure works. I mean, it just works. I mean, like, and there are lines in Batman that make no sense. That just make no sense.
Yeah.
But they still kind of work. And have become iconic. And, the same thing is true of a lot of those Burton movies where, I mean, Beetlejuice works at a stunning level. It's deeply moving. It's got so much just magic and charm to it. And not all of the performances are good. I mean, even in the Deo scene, like, they're clearly editing the hell out of that to get the closest to a balls to the wall performance from all of those actors, some of whom clearly have not really delivered the goods, but they've edited it well to get it as close as they can. And, and then there are movies that are great scripts, but just, the actors just haven't quite delivered. They're just, they're just not edited tightly enough. And I feel like even the bulk of Tank Girl's quips, these lines just don't have that movie magic. And I think that, really it's the musical number for me that most has it, that kind of starts a little weak, kind of, starts like, I'm not sure why she's making her sing, why is this villain giving up her authority by singing, under pressure so quickly, but then just goes into what it's doing and commits so strongly to it. And that's choreographed. As you say, like the fights aren't choreographed. There's no concern for them, but this number is choreographed. And that makes a big difference.
Loose. But this is the thing, you say it's choreographed, but it feels loose. It's that thing. This is the scene where you go, this has that Anchorman charm and that Anchorman kind of looseness, but you know it's been choreographed and, like you say, edited to within an inch of its life, like to do that bit, and you go, brilliant, fantastic. It's fun. It's so fun. But this is where, like you said, there's a kind of half-assing it with other parts of the film. And I'm kind of like, if this had gone all out in all of this, this would have been a standout classic this year. Like, this could have done so much to progress certain kinds of films. But, like, yeah, it just... I don't know.
It's hard not to admire it, right? I mean, it's hard not to admire it. I mean, it's Tank Girl. It is sort of doing the Margot Robbie thing, earlier. It's kind of like eschewing a traditional narrative in a slight senses. I mean, it's got a musical number in the middle of it. Tank Girl is sort of crude and not committed to, masculine standards of beauty at the time. I mean, this is way ahead of its time in terms of some of those things. Not perfectly, but, there. It's not scared of a lesbian kiss, it's got these, comic panels intercut. I mean, there's a lot that this is doing that you want to admire it for, right?
Yes.
But again, none of those things, with rare exception, are just really working for me. And unfortunately, there are so many just kind of bonehead beginner director mistakes, beginner editing mistakes that just really bring the result down. I mean, that the vision doesn't come across. You sort of get what the vision is, but it falls flat more often than it comes across as just an exquisite, mind fuck of a movie. I think Rocky Horror does a better job of, I mean, it's a loose script, it's a loose plot. Not all the performances are great. There's some lulls, along there, but it commits to what it's doing and doesn't half-ass stuff. And every line in there is, a classic or beloved by somebody.
As I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about other films that I would fit into this category. And I think, we've talked about a couple of them. But there are these kind of films where you go, this is just off from there's a great idea here and something's not working. And often it's sort of like either it's gone too far or it's too crazy or it's not gone far enough. It hasn't found its groove. You know what I mean? It hasn't found that sort of like sweet spot where it goes down the line. And others have. But I'm just sort of thinking about this. I'm just looking at a few others that in this way. I mean, one of the films I kind of find weird is like we've talked about Buckaroo Banzai. This thing of going like, we're going to do this wacky thing, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be like, everyone's going to go into it. Barbarella, I feel, is another
one of those two I adore. The other one doesn't work for me, but I can admire it. But people love it.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure this is at that level.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, you see this and go, there's a cult classic here. And I know people do like this film, and I can see there's an energy here that like they've all in. I mean, Barbarella is probably a good touch point for this. Where it could have been where they've gone like, this is the 1990s Barbarella. Like, we've done this thing of like, instead of her being a sex spot, we've got this sort of like kick-ass feminist
She's
icon.
A punk.
Yeah, cool.
Right. Yeah. Sure. This is the punk Barbarella,
Yeah.
And that has a loose plot, and that has a low budget, and some people hate it. Some people list it as among the worst science fiction movies ever made, and some people love the hell out of it. But it is clearly unadulteratedly itself, right?
Exactly.
From start to finish.
Yeah.
And this doesn't feel like that. This just feels like so many compromises.
And I think that's the problem. Like, I think that the thing that carries me through are the bits where I'm, as you sort of say, those sort of like, the energy bits. Things that carry me through this is the energy. I mean, I still think Laurie Petty is great as Tank Girl in this. I think she looks great. She carries the energy. I think sort of like, the costuming is cool. I think she gives it her all. And so I'm carried on those scenes where when she's good, she's great. And when she's not so good, I think she's still pretty good. And I think, like Naomi Watts is giving a good performance. I think she's I think she kind of struggles in some scenes at times, But overall, I think she's really good in this. So there's this kind of like up and down in it, but it's mostly sort of carrying me through. As long as I don't try and engage with the plot, I kind of go, yeah, it's an experience, this. And the thing is, that's how I felt about Barbarella.
Mhm.
When we discussed Barbarella, I was like, yeah, no, that film's kind of good fun. It's crazy. It's beautiful to look at. It's got some insanely good scenes. You know, Raquel Welch is doing the thing. The actors are good.
Great
It's
ideas,
great ideas. It's got some interesting
Do
bits.
this,
And
the scenes don't necessarily connect to each other properly,
no, but like,
Yeah.
but like, it's doing its
If
thing.
an idea flops for you, you're like, that's cool because I know in 5 minutes I'm gonna have another crazy idea and
Mm,
another balls to the wall scene,
yeah. The problem with this is it kind of. I wonder. You're right. You mentioned compromise. I wonder how much the studio was like. Oh, we want sequels, or we want this, we want that. So we need to have a plot. So we're going to have a villain. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. If this had been a lot even looser, as you say, as a film, I wonder if this had been even like could have been that Barbarella sort of thing. It just I don't know. Yeah, it just feels like you say it's hampered by the need for a plot.
Well, and I'm sure there's going to be somebody who listens to this and says, okay, these are two, you know, white guys from this era who, uh, this is some heteronormative,
Mm.
criticism. But of course that's not fair. And I will say that I think some of the compromise uh has to be because it's a female lead
Oh,
and
100%.
a female lead who is not doing the traditional, playing for the camera, the male gaze, being, traditional. But I'm struck by how toned down this character is.
Yeah.
Like, if this is going to be a punk, this needs to be a punk movie,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
And part of being punk is, sure, flick people off. There are a number of quips about male genitalia and stuff like that, which is fine, but there's not the same like snarl.
Yeah.
There's not the same like, aggressive in your face spirit to this movie. And instead, she's making sort of like PG-13 comments about, the decor and stuff like that. This needs to be, if anything, this needs to be more mean-spirited. I want it to be more mean-spirited.
Oh
like,
yeah. No. I mean, this is that film of like, I've seen as I did a little bit of like looking into this, and people are like, "Oh, this is like a queer icon," and it could have been, cool. When this film is the gayer this film is, the better.
mhm. I absolutely
Yeah,
Priscilla, the Queen of the Desert, the fuck out of this one.
yeah.
Like, yeah,
Drop all the masculine stuff. Drop all the standard plotting. You go as fucking hog wild as possible. Go punk. Go queer. It would have been an
yes.
absolute baller, and I think that was what. But you're right. But I do think it's hampered down by restraint. Where that I
Mhm.
can even there are parts of this where I can sort of feel that where they've gone, we're going to do this, and someone's gone, pull it back, pull that
Yeah.
back. Oh, we're going to make a dick joke. Okay, cool. But in the next scene, we've got to kind of, level that out with something else that's less dick joke. I mean, this has a whole thing about like
Well,
there's a character in this that basically wants to rape Jet Girl, and
mhm.
she gets to kill him at the end. That's fine. It all, that's fine, wonderful. But like, it never
It kind of
feels.
works.
It can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of works.
Kind of works at the
But it,
end,
but
but you're just kind of like, wait a minute. She was this mousy little girl at the beginning who just wanted to keep her head down, and now she is executing somebody in cold blood,
well, even like two,
who is
her
like,
arc, like not even just the start of the film, two scenes before that. Like she's
mhm.
still, and all of a sudden at the final raid, like she's got her hair done, she's got her makeup on, she's wearing sort of like more sort of like flamboyant clothing, and you're like, when the fuck did that happen? Hang on, sorry, when did
Yeah.
she become this other character? Like, yeah, it just jumps
Yeah,
from
and
one
I'm
thing to the
fine
next.
with they don't have to be likable characters. She can execute the
No,
guy in cold blood. It's cool that she gets, I know what they're trying to do,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah, 100%.
But it's cool that they're trying to do it, but it doesn't quite work. It's like
No.
she needs a little more of an arc, or it needs to be a better quip. There needs to be some acknowledgement of like, oh yeah, for sure, she's just shot a prisoner, in cold blood.
Here's the problem though, because his actions, and I'll in a movie terms or even real terms, that the actions of the guy do not deserve execution.
Yes, that's right.
He is a sleazeball, and he is clearly a
He's
potential.
hitting on her.
He's hitting on her, and with he's clearly a potential. There's clearly potential sexual assault there. Like he is getting on her, but like he never actually he never actually attempts to rape her. Like he gets interceded. Like so, I understand.
He doesn't even like just grope her or brush up against her uncomfortably. He just kind of implies. He's like, Dennis, and It's Always Philly. Like he sort of implies he might do this.
Yeah, make him worse. Like I've got no problem with her killing him at the end. That's not the problem. Make him worse. Like really have him using his power to force her to manipulate into doing things, or actually trying to undress her. I know this sounds awful, but you've got to justify that. Like otherwise, you say like she becomes a cold stone cold killer by the end of it, and then I'm going, hang on.
And I'm okay if she's a cold stone killer.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you've got to know that she's a cold stone killer, and like show that body and have her laughing, and it's like, oh, okay, that I mean, Margot Robbie would do that,
Yes, 100%.
She's not killing everybody who deserves it, but the movie knows that she's crazy and she's a murderer, The movie doesn't seem to know that here.
I mean, it has this whole thing. She says, I said, she's, about saying no. And that's fine. Consent is important. And that's fine. Get all that. But you've got to show that actually he was a legit physical threat. And at no point do I ever go, oh, he's a real sleazeball. But the film's not brave enough to do those things. And I think that's part of the problem. But again, like you say, the end, there are moments in this film that could feel like, you said, like the punk should come through. That moment when, like, say, like, Tank Girl saves Sam, they're running through, and all of a sudden they come across a squad of soldiers. All right, and she's like, she kneels down and she's like, oh, well, it was a good run, whatever. It's kind of infuriating because, again, I'm like, no, you're the one that's just fought to escape. You've kind of joined with a bunch of rippers. You've done this, you've done that. Like, this feels so madly out of character. Like, but if you'd been beaten up, if you'd have actually had some consequence where the fight with Malcolm McDowell had like taken a toll and you'd actually had the shit kicked out of you and it felt like a legit threat. And, you felt like, you'd seen one of your ripper mates die and there's something like, you feel like this is it. And it felt more like Ripley defending Newt, like she steps in front of her and she's like, get behind me, and she's about to, and then get saved. Like, I don't, it just feels, all of it feels kind of like, aren't you supposed to be this badass, like, female character? This feels kind of like, I don't know, it feels weird.
Well, and it's like, well, what was your motivation? Clearly she doesn't fear death, right? But I mean, if she wanted to save this person, then it's like, oh, I failed and I concede you're about to die.
Yeah.
I think like Margot Robbie could handle that, and you would just be like, oh, right, she's crazy. But she delivered the lines in a way that made you understand she's crazy. She concedes that she's lost, and she's like, oh, well, I lost, right? Like, I don't take it too seriously. It would have that edge to it. In terms of like, I'm thinking of the scene on the helicopter after she's captured in the beginning, because we're talking about sort of like the dick insults. And constantly the depiction of men in this movie is that they're constantly thinking, all of them are thinking with their dicks, know, and they're all easily like, every man is, 2 minutes away from unlocking any cell. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to object to that. It could be done better, but whatever. But that scene on the helicopter where she offers to suck a guy off. Okay. And then while he, and he says like, I'm going to have my guns at your head, and then he, presumably takes out his dick. And then she says, I like, can you bring me a microscope so I can see it? Which is like, that line of dialogue. That's what high school boys say, or
Yeah.
junior high boys, right? Like, and we see the same sort of like insult used earlier. Like, you know, I don't necessarily have a problem with, dick size jokes, but I mean, like the microscope thing is like,
Done.
it's immature. And why have you offered to perform oral sex and then insulted the person? And the person doesn't, like he's got a gun to your head, like he doesn't hit her with the gun. He's just like, he doesn't shoot her on the spot. There's no sense of threat. It's
No.
like you've enticed him into a situation where you can then make fun of him. But I don't know, like, I guess the point is
To humiliate him. That's it, really.
yeah, but it just doesn't work. I mean, and I don't, again, it's like I don't understand what her motivation is. She doesn't seem to really be having fun there and not care if she's, hit or killed.
Mm.
I just it doesn't, it's uncomfortable. And not uncomfortable because she's humiliating a guy or the dick size thing. It's just uncomfortable because I don't know. Is this supposed to be that she's having a bit of fun? Is this, are we supposed to think that like he's he's a jerk for taking her up on this offer, and sort of deserves this comeuppance because, like, I don't know how we're supposed to feel about this. And it doesn't seem a clearly thought through presentation, except, he's another dumb guy and we're gonna show that she doesn't give a shit. I mean, if you're gonna strike a blow against the patriarchy, this is not the way to do it.
No, I mean, I think this comes back to that thing you're saying about like it's not punk enough. It's not brave enough. It feels neutered. It feels um kind of like I don't know, like you say, that compromised. It almost feels like, they could have gone all out. They could have gone balls to the wall and done this stuff, but then they decide, um, oh well, that may not get us, and we might get too strong. I don't know. I don't know if this is this was a PG-13 or an R in the States. It was a 15 over here. Um, I don't know. Does it feel like is it like well, this is a comic book film, so it needs to get that PG-13, so it can't quite go all the way. I don't know if but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, if they really went extreme, they'd have like 4 sexual assaults in this movie,
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I mean, is this after Thelma and Louise? I think it is,
I
right?
think it is. Yeah, Thelma is like 92, 93. I've thought, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't know. I mean, it can't sort of like quite decide what it wants to do or how far it wants to take those things, and it clearly wants to take the sort of like middle finger to the sort of uh you know male assaulting establishment,
mm,
and rightly so. But the presentation of that establishment is so inconsistent that it's possible that it generates sympathy for the men, and that is a sign you've probably done something wrong.
well, I think you're right. I mean, firstly, Thelma and Louise is 1991, so
Yeah,
um, but
4 years earlier.
yeah, and, a great film. I'll happily recommend that over this one, any day of the week. But one of the things I'm just looking at the films of '95 just to do that comparison. We've talked about the other action films. Female leads in these kind of this kind of film, and there's a couple of others that sort of I'm looking at and going, okay, that's not low budget, but this is the same year as um Cutthroat Island, which I know was a massive flop, but that was Gina Davis, pirate film. Also, Sam Raimi's The Quick and the Dead, which was like Sharon Stone leading which actually I kind of like that film. That's a good pleasure. I kind of really enjoyed that film. Female uh, cowboy film. So it's not like again, it's not unknown. Dangerous Minds is the same year.
Mm.
Michelle Pfeiffer. This isn't an action film, but again, I kind of sort of feel that um, we were entering an era where it was a bit like, oh no, we can do, you know, female leads in certain things, and this can be done. So, you can do that, and then you could take it forward and sort of, like you said, not so much to say fight the patriarchy, but you could have done that and gone, right, here's those other films that are going to do that still, but we're going to go all out. We're going to be like, we're going to be this other thing, like Natural Born Killers as a super or as a post-apocalyptic sci-fi, zany film. They can do those.
Yeah.
We're doing that, and you go, cool. That would be amazing. So, yeah,
And make the characters unlikable. I mean, make the characters as punk as you want, I don't care if, I mean, I shouldn't say I don't care, but I mean, I'm not gonna, object if all the men are incompetent, potential rapists, I mean, you do you, present the world that you want presented. But you're right. There are other examples, I mean, at this point. And I mean, and I think Natural Born Killers is such a great movie and so uncompromisingly itself, edited to within an inch of its life. Everything in that movie, works, or at least if it, is troubling, I mean, it's a masterpiece. But, and by all means, do the feminist equivalent, do the gay equivalent, absolutely, I want that. I will queue to see that on opening day. But I mean, it's the way that this feels constrained, punches pulled. It doesn't sort of have that movie magic. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really have a consistent tone. I mean,
question then. I'm gonna we'll wrap. I think because we sort of we've gone through, so I'll wrap up on this as a question, because this is a franchise.
I hope I haven't made you dislike this movie.
No. I think I still stand by the fact that, like, I'm not saying it's a good film. I would not say this is a good film. I'm not holding it up and saying this is an example of how films should be done. I still enjoy this film. I enjoyed the ride. And as I say, my terms of watching this are don't engage with the plot.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy it on a performance and a visual basis. And that's it. Like, there are scenes in this that are cool. I love the animation inserts. I kind of like I thought the montages with the comic paneling and everything's good. It's fun. It's a bit different. I enjoyed that. Like that. That's it. The moment I try to engage with the plot on this is the moment you realize, yeah, this is crap. This is utter crap. So
can I interject real
mm-hmm.
quick? Can I ask you, does the photo shoot invading an army base and seducing the guys by saying that, you're going to take their photos for a sort of like sexy calendar, except they don't really get naked? I mean, does that scene work for you at all?
Yeah, it made me chuckle. Yeah, I thought it was funny.
Okay. For me, I just am like, I don't know. Like, I can't imagine any guy reacting like this. I think the performance, I think the two female performances are good, and they kind of like, I think especially Lori Petty kind of goes into her sort of like, Madonna flamboyant sort of photographer and pulls it off pretty well there, and she steals the show in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, and I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a sort of parody of how, I guess that I can't think of an action movie in which the men infiltrated a base and said, all a woman needs is to be told that we're going to photograph her. And like, what I'm saying? I don't know.
This is Beverly Hills Cop.
Works.
To me, it works. I enjoyed it. I think it's funny. It's silly. It is a parody. This is still the scene of going back to Beverly Hills Cop, all right, and that franchise. One of the things there's always a scene where Axel Foley goes into somewhere and plays up his confidence. He'll flash a badge and he'll be like, "I'm import and export," or "I'm this and I'm that. I'm the building inspector," and he'll start shouting at someone and say, "What is this?" And he'll start talking, and his confidence and stuff carries him through. right? And it's kind of like shows that like people are idiots, and the moment they're sort of directed to do things by someone who has full confidence as if they're supposed to be there, they'll do it. So to me, I was like, yeah, I've seen this scene before, 100, like several times. Like it's that this is that scene. This is Eddie Murphy going in and pretending to be customs so that he can look into the crates of the crime that he's investigating, or going into to get the house, to pretend to be the building inspector so he has somewhere to stay in Beverly Hills Cop 2. It's all the same stuff. It's just done
Right.
differently. So to me, it's sort of like this is just a parody version of that to show if you walk into somewhere with full confidence, as if you know what you're doing, everyone thinks you're supposed to be there. There is literally a
That's
story.
true, by the way.
Yeah, well, there's a story at the moment. Some kid spent, not kid, he was in his 20s, spent 3 months working out of some sort of tech company's office for 3 months. He stayed there, he lived there, he showered there and worked there to build up his own startup company. Everyone just assumed he worked there and said nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously,
Yeah, I
worked.
mean, I've walked into past several security checkpoints,
Yeah.
just especially in my younger days.
So it's
Yeah,
just
I
that.
guess I feel like that confidence isn't quite there. I mean, and maybe this has to do with my feelings about the performances. Like,
Mm,
I feel like obviously Jet Girl is not supposed to be really confident, but I feel like the claim of the photo shoot thing is so bizarre, and the way it's done is so bizarre, and that combined with the lack of confidence, the little breaks in even Lori Petty's performance, or
mm.
her character's confidence, would be enough to just have that whole thing collapse.
Yeah, no, I'm
I
fine
mean,
with it. I think it works, and
okay,
I actually kind of like the fact that because Jet Girl's been looking to have someone sort of build up her confidence, and actually that's what Tank Girl's doing, and giving her that sort of thing to and try to sort of be empowered, but she gets carried away and has to be sort of dragged away and sort of like, "Oh, it's fine, it works well to me. It's not the greatest comedy scene ever, not by a long shot, but it works in the moment, and I kind of thought it made me chuckle. And again, the inserts of the little the calendar panels from the comics and stuff. It all works. It's interesting. It's fun. I mean, again,
except they reused.
yeah, that's fine, and I'm fine with that. Like it's a small vignette in a large film. The thing I should say is again, I keep saying like I'm not saying this is a great film. I'm not sort of
Yeah,
defending it,
yeah.
but I am. I could have this on in the background, and I could sort of engage with it enough to enjoy scene to scene and go, yeah, that's good, and then just sort of ignore probably the last act. Like, okay, the finale's here, the third act's here. I don't need to see that bit. I've enjoyed the rest of
I'm
the
gonna
film.
keep. That's when I'm gonna run the vacuum.
Yeah,
And keep it
exactly.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, 100%.
sure.
Like that's exactly it. The finale of this film is crap. It tries to become an action piece. It doesn't work. It becomes a sort of a sci-fi hero film. It doesn't work. It's best when it's being irreverent and silly, and that's what it should have stayed as.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm sorry I
question for you then.
interrupted your
No. It's
final
it's a good
thoughts.
question. So my question is, and we'll wrap up on this. This is obviously based on a comic, and we all know that comic IP is big, can always be used. Do you think this could work again today? Could they? I mean,
Absolutely.
they're remaking obviously Barbarella. So do you think they could remake Tango?
Absolutely. And I love it.
Mm.
I mean, this is so close. Well, it's not so close. I think this is, 30 degrees off. But I mean, um, you know, I don't think anyone could watch this movie and not think that there is a spectacular, amazing movie in here.
Mm. I agree.
There is an irreverent punk version of it that doesn't pull its punches, that is gayer, that is more transgressive, that is even more aggressive with its animation, and where the characters have a bit more charisma. There's a bit more just professional editing and, slightly better screenwriting, you know. Um, I think this, I don't think anyone could watch this and not think this is now what an amazing movie.
Hmm.
In If it were redone correctly. Um, Now whether that would be a commercial success, who the hell knows, right? I mean, lots of great movies don't succeed, and lots of terrible movies do. And there's still a stigma, not as much as in '95, against, female leads. I mean, the reality is any new Tank Girl movie will be review bombed from the moment it's announced, and the moment those listings go live on IMDb.
Which is
These,
mad. It is
I
madness to
know,
me. It's
so
weird.
stupid. It's so stupid. Like, I mean, and I don't know. I mean, not every movie has to be for you, fanboys.
Yeah.
Black people and women are allowed to make movies too. And if you don't like those movies, that's fine. You know, there is no law requiring you to watch them. The fact that somebody in the world has money to finance a movie not made by a white man is in fact okay. That's in fact the free market and the freedom that you pretend to champion. So, but I mean, yeah, absolutely. There should be a remake of this. I loved the Tank Girl comics, and I think you could even punk it up and just make it aggressive and really, even today I think it would be countercultural. I think women feel a tremendous pressure, even young women today of a different generation, to fit beauty standards, to be polite, to fit within certain models of correct behavior and places for women. And there's room for a movie that would explode the hell out of all of that and be fun and be beloved by a lot of men. In addition, not that that's the goal, but I think this could be a fantastic movie. What about you?
No, I feel the same. I think it's one of those films you go, right, this is one of those, yeah, this is an IP address that I think we've said before, this doesn't need hundreds of millions of dollars to be a massive film. Keep that budget low. All right. Bring it in low. Keep it straightforward. But like, yeah, get some really talented writers, get some really talented cast. Like, just go for it. Like, think Fury Road. Think those kinds of films where you go like, think a cross between Barbarella and Fury Road, and I'm in. Basically.
Yeah. And gay it up, punk it
Yeah.
up, and for everyone, look, I've said before, like, I'm okay with, if Michael Bay, wants to have an ass shot, that's not the big problem with those Transformers movies. Okay. I'm a big fan of Barbarella. I also have no problem if you want to make a feminist movie in which he's cutting guys' dicks off. I don't care, like, you do you, make the best version of that. Not that I'm saying Tank Girl would be that, but make the best version of that you can. By all means, there's room for these visions, and God knows we desperately need a movie like that today.
Yeah.
There isn't enough. I mean, even Wonder Woman, I think the first one is a great, at least a very good movie. But she's still, a supermodel. She's busy kicking ass and looking like a Scott Snyder girl, in the process. I mean, so I think that, that aesthetic, it is a kind of like, crazy Mad Max kind of, aesthetic, but, with a female character, it's very punk. I would love to see this shit.
Yeah, I would. I think, like I say, keep it low, go for it, go all out. I just think, I was just looking, and we mentioned obviously about Birds of Prey, and obviously you mentioned about Wonder Woman, and like I say, I would say do a Tank Girl film, keep men away from it as much as possible. Really, get yourself a really good female director who can sort of tell that story, loves the comics, came up on those comics, has that punk sensibility. Just fucking go for it. I think it'd be a blast, and I also think, like, if done well, I think you'd be amazed at how well it would do at the cinema. I think there'd be an audience like there's all these sort of like teen and women across the board, but like there's a whole male and teen audience that would just be like eating that shit up because it's a good representation of that attitude. I just think it'd be awesome, but it kind of feels you need to be brave to do it.
Yeah, I think so too. And it needs to have that uncompromising, quality to it. And Birds of Prey wants to be a feminist movie, but really is a very conventional superhero movie. I mean, the Marvel, and Captain Marvel are the same way. I mean, just disasters.
Yeah, but they're trying to do something within the machine that is the Marvel MCU, and you can feel that all over it. Where you're like,
and Tank Girl cannot succeed in the machine, right? Tank Girl needs to be an irreverent, not I wouldn't say angry, right? Like, the creators can be angry, but the movie needs to have that irreverence, sort of like fun. Yeah, fuck you. I'm glad to shoot you in the face, but I'm not gonna, Tank Girl is not bitter, but violent and not gonna be, put in her place, not gonna be confined, not gonna be tied down, and preferably there's got to be some kangaroo fucking.
yeah. Well, it is Australia. I'm sure it happens now.
I mean, can you imagine how much fun that scene would be with like porn music starts to play, and there's like a parody of like a sex scene, except it's a kangaroo and it's subverting all of these heteronormative.
I think it'd be fine. I do think there's a part of me that's still like, this 42-year-old man's going up. That feels uncomfortable. Oh, go for it. Do it. You make your choices. It's not for me. Make me feel uncomfortable. That's fine. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. One thing I would say is, again, about you said about the attitude and that sort of thing. Again, like, just keep that budget low. I'm thinking about the studios. Like, this is not going to come from a big studio. Like, Disney's not going to do this. Warner Brothers won't do this. Paramount's not doing this. Like,
Michael Eisner's not going to do Tank Girl.
No, not that kind of Tank Girl. But I think
we're going to do Tank Girl, but it's going to be a $200 million movie. We're going to get a drop dead gorgeous woman attached to it, and we're going to test market it. We're going to make sure that we're hitting that 18 to 40 demographic. We got to bring in at least 35% men on this one, guys.
Exactly. All that nonsense. This is, again, look at those small studios. Like, this is going to be, again, I don't know all the small studios, but I'm like, I always sort of thought of like Blumhouse, but I'm thinking like even like Lionsgate and other films like that, like just do it small and kind of like, I don't know. It just feels like this should be. Like, I'm surprised it hasn't. Like, we're on the 4th Hellboy film this year, and I haven't seen this one yet. But the fact we've got 4 Hellboy films and we've only got 1 Tank Girl film kind of feels weird. It kind of feels like we should have at least had like a series or anime or, you've got like the Harley Quinn animated show, which I've not watched a lot of. I've watched a couple of episodes. I think Kayla Kuko does really good in it. I think it's kind of cool. I enjoy it. It's, it's got an audience. It's cool. Do something. Why have we not got that? Like, drawn by the guy who did like the Gorillas animation and stuff like that. I don't know. It just feels like, it's an IP that's sort of like not been mined. It's bizarre. I'm not saying mine it. That's it.
But
like,
it's one, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying do it to death, but like this, how is it that this is not represented in some form of entertainment?
Well, and just to be clear about budget, the point you're making is A, to guarantee its success, and B, also to avoid the studio influence.
Exactly.
I mean, at $25-50 million, you get a lot less notes than you do at 150.
Yeah. That's how Ryan Reynolds was able to do Deadpool, because he was like, we'll do it for 63 million. And everyone was like, all right, you go do that. We can write that.
I mean, Burton brought in Beetlejuice 2 for under 100.
Yeah.
It's crazy. No, I agree with you, but it needs to have that irreverent, quality. It needs to have, and be absolutely uncompromising, and I can see it being a great success. And frankly, I think we need that movie. I think that, women need that movie, men need that movie, and society in a world where we have a lot of different visions that are getting, funded, but there's nothing like this. I mean, this is still, it is in that sense. That's why I'm saying, like, I want to like this. It is ahead of its time. It is doing, in terms of how it's shot and how the story is told, it's behind its time, as you've demonstrated, right? But in terms of its ideas and what it's trying to do and its source material, it's still ahead of its time. And so I'm with you. I'll be there on day one.
Yeah, I would be. I think I'd be like, if someone was to announce we're doing this, and it was like I could see all those sort of like, you know, green flags when they're like, we've got this person involved and we're doing it for this one. I'd be like, I'm all in. Go for it. Offend me, make me feel uncomfortable. Like, do it.
Absolutely. I love that shit.
Yeah, go for it. Right. Anyway, I think we should wrap up there. This is an interesting film. Any final thoughts? And before we do quickly just wrap up,
Kangaroo fucking.
Okay, we'll leave it on that. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope let us know what you think. Have you watched this film? Is this, you know, we've defended some, you know, odd films. I've defended Buckaroo Banzai. We've both defended Howard the Duck. We're now a bit split on Tank Girl. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on Tank Girl? Does it stand up? Is it something that should be returned to? Let us know what your thoughts are. Anyway, for now though, if you've enjoyed what we're doing, please leave a review on whatever platform you're on, or leave some feedback. And go check out the Patreon. The Patreon's got a lot more sort of apocalyptic stuff we've got on there. Loads of the side things we're doing, as well as 30-minute thoughts from me, trekking through the Twilight Zone, load of other stuff. We've got a bunch of things going on over there. So go check it out. More stuff coming as well for the future, doing all kinds of things. But for now, Julian, thank you very much for this conversation. A lot of fun.
Thank you.
I forget whose choice this was now, but I think we're both kind of keen on this.
This was yours.
So. Oh, there you go. Shocker. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.